Kyle had no idea that one mistake would change his entire life. He was just a repair technician, a human working on a giant alien space station called Ravari Prime. The station was home to dozens of alien species, strange rules, and secret places. Humans weren't allowed to enter. Kyle didn't care much about that. He had one job: fix a broken ventilation system near the upper noble quarters. Then go home and sleep. Armed with only a small toolkit and a scanner, Kyle climbed into the maintenance shaft. It was tight, dark, and smelled like old metal. He crawled forward, ignoring the warning sign in alien language that blinked red behind him. He didn't read Ravari script anyway. The scanner beeped, showing a high heat signature nearby. That must be the broken part. Kyle muttered and crawled faster. But as he moved toward it, the floor beneath him creaked. Then it snapped. With a loud crash, Kyle fell straight through a loose grate and tumbled down into a room filled with steam and soft golden lights. He landed on his back, groaning, "OWW. I need a raise." But before he could get up, he saw something that made his heart stop. Standing just a few feet away was an alien woman. Tall, silver-skinned, and completely unclothed. She was frozen, staring at him with wide, glowing eyes full of shock and terror. She grabbed a nearby towel and screamed it like someone scared for her safety. But like someone who had just seen death itself. You saw me." She gasped, backing into the wall. Kyle raised his hands. "Whoa, didn't mean to. I swear, I just fell through the ceiling." He turned his head away quickly, face red. "I didn't know anyone was here. I swear." She looked like she might faint. But then she rushed forward, grabbed his arm, and hissed, "If the guards find you here, and find me like this, you'll be executed." Kyle blinked. "Wait, I'll be executed?" She looked terrified. "No, I will be, and you too. Because our traditions say, if an outsider sees a Ravari noble unclothed, it means only one thing." Kyle stared at her, completely confused. "What thing?" She swallowed hard. "It means you intend to take me as your mate," Kyle choked. What? Suddenly, loud footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Guards, coming closer. "Hide." "Me," Kyle whispered, heart pounding. "There's no time," she said, voice shaking. "They'll see us, and I'll be punished." Then she looked into his eyes and said something that made no sense but sounded terrifyingly serious. "You must claim me as your bonded mate." Kyle stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Lady, I don't even know your name." "I'm Lira," she said quickly. "And if you don't say we're bonded, they'll assume you tried to violate me. And you'll die." Before Kyle could reply, the door burst open and two tall Ravari guards stormed in, weapons drawn. They stopped when they saw Lira holding the towel tightly and Kyle standing beside her with his hands up. One guard growled, "Who is this human? Why is he in the ladies' chamber?" Kyle's mind raced. He looked at Lira, and she nodded ever so slightly, her eyes begging. Kyle swallowed and spoke. I am her mate." The room fell deadly silent. Even the guards froze. Then, one of them lowered his weapon slowly and said, "Take them to the Council of Elders." "Now?" Kyle blinked. "Wait, now? Can't I at least put my tools away first?" The guard grabbed his arm roughly. "Move," as they were marched down the hallway. Lira whispered, "I'm sorry, human. I didn't want this either." Kyle gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, me too. I was just trying to fix a broken pipe," but deep inside, both of them knew this was no small misunderstanding. On Ravari Prime, tradition was law. And claiming a Ravari noble accident or not meant entering a world of danger, politics, and possibly love. Whether Kyle liked it or not, he had just stepped into a game he didn't understand, and now there was no turning back. Kyle stood in the middle of a strange room with golden walls and glowing crystals. This was not a court. Not a prison. It was something far worse. It was the Ravari Council of Elders, and they had the power to decide life or death with a single word. The elders sat in a circle, their long robes sweeping across the floor like liquid shadows. All of them had sharp eyes and long silver markings on their faces. They stared at Kyle like he was a bug that had crawled into their sacred temple. Lira stood beside him, still wrapped in a ceremonial cloak. Her face calm, but Kyle could feel her hand shaking slightly. The oldest elder leaned forward. "You?" Human claimed to be the bonded mate of Lady Lira, daughter of the House of Varelis. Kyle nodded, trying to look confident. "Yes. Yes, I do." The elder's voice was cold. "Do you understand the weight of that claim?" Kyle looked around. Not really. A murmur went through the elders. Another elder, a woman with glowing blue eyes, stood. "If this bond is false, if you lie to protect your life, both of you will die." Lira stepped forward quickly. "It is not false, Council. I claimed him in the sight of truth." That seemed to carry weight. The elders whispered among themselves, speaking in Ravari tongue. Then the oldest elder raised his hand, silencing the chamber. "There is one way to prove this," he said. "The mating ritual." Kyle blinked. "Excuse me." The elder continued, "You must perform the rite of unity. Before us, under the flame of spirit, only true bonds survive the ritual." Kyle whispered to Lira, "Are they asking us to?" "No," she said quickly. "It's symbolic, not physical, but still dangerous." The guards led them into another chamber, high above the station, under a dome of starlight. In the center burned a strange blue fire that made no smoke but hummed with energy. Lira whispered, "If the flame senses a false bond, it will strike us down." Kyle looked at her. "And if it thinks we're real?" "Then we live," she said, "and we become officially joined." By Ravari law, Kyle took a deep breath. "Let's do it." They stepped into the circle and knelt before the flame. A priest held out a small glowing orb. "Place your hands upon the bondstone. Speak your truth, heart to heart." Kyle placed his hand on the orb, and Lira did the same. The orb warmed, pulsing with light. Then a voice, not from the priest, but from the orb itself, code through the room. "Speak the truth of your heart." Lira went first, her voice soft. "I feared my life. I feared being used, traded, and thrown away like nothing. I saw a human fall from the ceiling, and instead of calling me names or laughing, he turned his face away." She looked at Kyle. That small kindness felt like hope. The flame flickered. Then Kyle spoke. "I didn't come here looking for love. I came here to fix a broken vent." The elders frowned at his honesty. "But when I saw her, I didn't see a noble. I saw someone trapped." He took a breath. "I don't know her well, but I don't want her hurt. And if I can help her escape all this, even if it means pretending, I'll do it." The flame roared to life, rising high, and Kyle panicked. But then it settled, glowing warmly around them like a soft blanket. The priest bowed. "The bond has been accepted." The elders stood one by one and gave a slow nod of approval. "You are now joined by fire and truth," the head elder said. "You may leave." Kyle and Lira exited the chamber in silence. Once outside, Kyle turned to her. "So, are we really married now? The Ravari law?" "Yes," she said, not meeting his eyes. "You are now my bonded mate." Kyle scratched his head. "I was hoping for a dinner first." She gave a small smile, but it faded quickly. "The danger is not over," she said. "There are those who will never accept this bond." "Like who?" Kyle asked. She paused, then whispered, "My former betrothed." "Commander Raylan." Kyle groaned. "Of course there's an angry ex." Lira nodded. "And he's powerful, ruthless, and hates humans." Kyle sighed. "Great. Just great." But deep inside, something had shifted. He no longer saw Lira as just a stranger. He saw someone brave enough to fight her own fate. And maybe, just maybe, He was starting to care. Kyle never thought being married would feel so weird. He wasn't in love. He didn't even know Lira's favorite food or favorite color. But now they were bound by Ravari law, and everyone on the station treated them like a real couple. The problem was, they weren't. Their living space was small, barely enough for one person. A narrow room with a stiff bed, tools on the walls, and a blinking light that flickered every few seconds. Lira walked in, looked around, and wrinkled her nose. "This is where you live?" she asked, sounding half disgusted, half sin-shock. Kyle shrugged. "It's not the palace, but it has a working sink." Mostly, she stepped over a pile of dirty clothes and tapped the metal floor with her foot. No carpet, no temperature control. And no tea corner? He looked confused. "What's a tea corner?" She gave him a look like he'd just asked what air was. Oh. Then she sighed and sat stiffly on the edge of the bed, keeping her distance. The silence between them grew heavier. Neither of them knew what to say. Kyle scratched his head. "So, we're married now, yes?" Lira said quietly. "By Ravari law, do we have to share the bed?" he asked awkwardly. Her eyes widened. "No, absolutely not. I'll sleep on the floor." Kyle blinked. "Wait, no, I'll sleep on the floor. You're the noble." "I'm not a noble anymore," she said, her voice flat. Not after this. That made Kyle pause. He didn't fully understand the customs, but he could see it in her eyes. She had lost something important. Maybe everything. They ate in silence that night. Sitting on opposite ends of the room, Kyle handed her a plate of reheated food, some kind of protein cubes and dried vegetables. Lira poked at it. "This is what humans eat." "It's food," he said, chewing loudly to prove it. She took a tiny bite, frowned, and didn't eat the rest. Later, Kyle lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. Lira was silent on the bed, turned away from him. But in the middle of the night, he heard something, a soft sniffle. She was crying. Trying to be quiet about it, Kyle wanted to say something, maybe offer comfort, but he didn't. What could he say? They were strangers, pushed into something neither of them asked for. Still, hearing her cry did something to him. It made him feel responsible. The next day, everything got more complicated. Word had spread Lady Lira was now bonded to a human. Some aliens whispered. Some laughed, others just stared. Kyle was used to being ignored on the station now. People looked at him like he was carrying a ticking bomb at the engineering bay. His coworkers gave him strange looks. "Is it true?" One asked, "You married a Ravari noble?" Kyle rubbed his forehead. "Can we not talk about it?" Another. One grinned. "Is she bossy?" "She's quiet," Kyle muttered, and confused. Back in the room, Lira stayed inside all day. Barely speaking, she stared at the wall, deep in thought. Kyle finally broke the silence. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," she replied softly. "I gave up my family, my future, everything, just to survive." He sat beside her, not too close, and nodded. "Same," he said. "Not the noble stuff. But I've got no one either." She looked at him, studying his face. "You don't seem like a warrior." "I'm not," he said. "I fix broken stuff." She gave a small smile, the first real one he'd seen from her. "That might be useful," she said. "My heart is very broken." The days passed slowly, but something began to shift. They started talking more, eating together, even laughing. Once or twice, Kyle repaired a cracked wall panel while Lira arranged his tools in perfect rows. She added a small table in the corner and placed a cup of steaming herbal drink. "This is a tea corner," she said proudly. Kyle took a sip and coughed. "It tastes like dirt." She rolled her eyes. "It's good for your blood, then." Just when things were beginning to feel calm, danger returned. A message arrived sealed in noble silver and red ink. Kyle opened it, frowning at the words. Lira read it behind him and gasped. "It's from Commander Raylan," she said. Her voice trembling, "He demands a challenge." Kyle blinked. "A challenge?" "He doesn't believe our bond," she whispered. "He wants to fight you for my claim." Kyle stood frozen. "I don't even know how to fight." Lira looked into his eyes, fear returning. "If you lose, he takes me, and you die." The silence between them now held something more than awkwardness. It held fear, fate, and the beginning of something deeper. Kyle took a shaky breath. "Then we'd better make sure he believes we're real." The message from Commander Raylan hung in the air like poison. Kyle stared at it, rereading the words, but they didn't. "Change, your claim is weak, human. Face me in the circle of blood, or surrender the girl." He looked at Lira, whose face had turned pale silver with fear. "Is he serious?" Kyle asked, his voice quiet. Lira nodded slowly. "Raylan doesn't make empty threats. He always finishes what he starts." Kyle ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not a soldier. I fix pipes and clean filters. I don't even own a weapon." Lira looked away. "He's not just angry. He's humiliated. I was supposed to be his bride, bonded by politics and tradition." Her voice dropped. "And I chose a human instead." Kyle let out a nervous laugh. "You didn't exactly choose me. I fell through your ceiling." She gave him a soft look. "Yes, but I didn't push you away either." That night, Kyle couldn't sleep. He lay on the floor, staring up at the ceiling again. Only this time, he didn't hear her cry. She was sitting upright, thinking, planning, worrying. The silence between them was thick. Finally, Kyle spoke. "If I have to fight, what are my chances?" Lira hesitated. "In Ravari tradition, you fight in front of the council. It's not always to the death, but he will try to make it so." Kyle turned to her. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Lira looked surprised, then said, "Because you saw me without shame and still respected me." Kyle blinked. "That's all it took." "No," she whispered. "But that was the first time anyone did." The next morning, the station's training hall opened its doors to someone very unexpected, a human with oil stains on his clothes and fear in his eyes. Kyle entered and faced a tall female trainer with gray skin and glowing green eyes. "I need to learn how to not die," he said. The trainer smiled darkly. "You're fighting Raylan, aren't you?" He nodded. She whistled. "You'll need more than training. You'll need a miracle." Kyle took a breath. "Well, let's start small." Over the next 2 days, Kyle trained. He fell, got bruised, tripped over his own feet, but he kept getting up. The other aliens watched in disbelief. He wasn't strong, not like them. But he refused to quit. Every time he got knocked down, he got up again, even bleeding. Lira watched from a distance. She brought him water, medicine, and silent support. At night, she massaged the swelling from his arms and shoulders. "You don't have to do this," she whispered once. "We can run." Kyle looked at her. "No, I want to face him because I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." He paused. "And maybe I want to prove I'm more than just a guy who fell through your ceiling." On the third day, the challenge began. The circle of blood wasn't an arena, but a sacred ring in the Temple of Vows, surrounded by elders, nobles, and watching eyes from every part of the station. Commander Raylan stood in ceremonial armor, glowing red and sharp as fire. Kyle wore basic training gear and held a short wooden staff. He looked like someone who wandered in by mistake. Raylan laughed when he saw him. "This is your chosen mate, Lira." He called across the ring, a weak, trembling ape. Kyle stepped forward, trying to look brave. "I may be weak, but I'm still standing." He said, "Let's see how long you last with someone who doesn't give up." The gong sounded, and the fight began. Raylan moved like a storm, fast and brutal. Kyle dodged the first hit, barely, and rolled to the side. The crowd gasped. No one expected him to survive even the first blow, but Kyle used his size, his quick thinking. He ducked under swings, used the staff to block attacks, and waited for small chances. Each time Raylan missed, he grew angrier. "You are nothing," the commander roared. Kyle smiled through bloodied lips. "Then why haven't you beaten me yet?" Lira stood at the edge of the ring, heart pounding. She whispered a silent prayer, not to a god, but to Kyle's stubborn will. "Please don't die," she thought. "Not for me. Not like this." Then it happened. Raylan lunged too hard, missed, and Kyle swept his legs, slamming him into the ground. The crowd gasped. Kyle stood over him, breathing heavy, staff raised. "Yield," he said. Raylan growled, reaching for a hidden blade, but before he could strike, an elder stepped in. Enough. The challenge was over. The human had proven his claim. Kyle dropped the staff, his body shaking. Lira rushed to him and wrapped her arms around him tightly. "You fool," she whispered. "You actually won." He held her back, smiling weakly. "Told you. I've fixed broken things." She laughed softly for the first time without sadness. And somewhere deep inside them both, something fragile began to grow, trust, maybe even something more. The fight was over, but peace had not yet begun. Commander Raylan had been defeated, humiliated in front of nobles and warriors alike. But instead of accepting loss, he stormed out of the arena in silence. That silence was louder than any threat. He could speak. Lira stood beside Kyle, her hand in his. Not for show this time, but for support. The elders called for a final judgment. Though Kyle had won the challenge, Ravari law required something more to seal the bond, something deeper. Older and sacred, the bonding ceremony. Lira's eyes widened when they said it, the flame of truth again. She whispered. Kyle raised an eyebrow. "We already did that part. This time," she said quietly. "It will test our hearts, not just our words," back in their shared room. Lira explained the ancient tradition. "We will sit before the bondstone again, but now we must open our minds fully," she said. "No lies, no walls, just our truest feelings." Kyle rubbed his neck. "What if we don't know what those are?" She gave him a sad smile. "Then the flame will know. We are faking it." He sat down, exhausted but curious. "You don't trust people easily, do you?" "No," she said softly. "I was born to be given away, traded for alliances, dressed up to hide my fear." Kyle leaned forward. "Then, maybe it's time someone saw the real you." The next morning, they walked together to the Temple of Kati. The Temple of Flame. This time, no crowd, no warriors. No councils, just the two of them and the silent priest. The bondstone pulsed softly with light. Waiting, they sat across from each other. Hands touching the crystal surface, the priest lit the sacred fire, its color turning from blue to violet. "Speak without hiding," he said, "or the flame will turn against you." Lira went first, her voice a soft tremble. "I hated you. At first," she admitted. "You saw me in my weakest moment." Kyle nodded gently. "I didn't mean to, I know," she said. "And yet?" "You looked away," she smiled faintly. No one ever looked away before. The flame warmed. A soft light glowing around them. Kyle took a breath. "I've never had someone choose me before." Lira blinked, surprised. "I'm always the guy fixing things in the background," he said. "Not the one who gets noticed. Or needed." He met her eyes. "But now, I want to be someone who deserves being chosen." The flame burned brighter, not wild, but steady and calm. It seemed to surround them with comfort, not judgment. Lira placed her other hand on his. "I'm scared," she whispered, "that I'll disappoint you. That you'll leave when you see how broken I am inside." Kyle chuckled gently. "Too late. I already saw your tea corner." She blinked, then laughed. A real laugh that melted something heavy between them. The bondstone glowed gold. The priest stepped back, bowing his head. "The bond is now complete," he said. "You are not. Strangers acting, you are joined by truth." As they stood up, Kyle looked at Lira. "So, this is real now." She nodded. "Yes, I mean. It's not just a lie anymore," she smiled. "No, it's not." They left the temple side by side, walking slower than usual. Kyle glanced at her. "So what now?" Lira looked thoughtful. "Now, we figure out what this means. Together." They didn't rush back to their quarters. Instead, they walked through the gardens near the outer ring of the station, where few people visited. Glowing flowers shimmered in the light of a nearby moon. Kyle plucked one and handed it to her without thinking. She stared at it, stunned. "No one's ever done that," she said. "No one ever gave me something just because." He shrugged. "It matched your eyes." Lira looked away. Cheeks slightly tinted with lavender, her version of a blush, back in their quarters. The silence between them was now gentle, not heavy. They shared tea, laughed about his awkward training, and didn't talk about war, nobles, or threats. Just the quiet, the real, and the new beginning. Later that night, Kyle lay on the floor again. Arms behind his head, Lira looked down from the bed, then hesitated. "You don't have to sleep down there anymore," she said. Kyle blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "We're bonded now. Doesn't mean we have to rush," he said. She smiled. "No, but you don't have to be far either." So Kyle stood, walked slowly over, and lay down on the other side of the bed, not touching, not holding, just close, and in that soft quiet. With the hum of the station around them, two strangers who had been forced into a fake marriage began to feel something very real. The bond was now official, but peace still didn't come. Not for Kyle, not for Lira. It began with a shadow. Someone had broken into their quarters while they were away. Nothing was stolen, but the message was, "Kliru are not safe." Lira stood in the doorway, silent, staring at her broken teacup on the floor. It had been left untouched for days, until now. Kyle walked beside her, whispering. This was a warning. She nodded, voice tight. Raylan's pride was wounded, but his power is not. Later that evening, they found a scroll placed under their door, sealed in black wax. Lira opened it with trembling hands. There was no signature, just 6 words. "Your bond won't save you forever." Kyle looked up sharply. "He's going to come after us again, isn't he?" Lira sat down slowly. "He'll never stop. Not until I'm back under his control or dead." She stared at the wall, then whispered, "And he'll destroy you just to prove a point." Silence stretched between them. Kyle finally spoke. Then, "We leave." Lira turned to him, confused. "Leave? Leave where?" He leaned closer, his voice firm now. "We find a ship, we escape the station. And we disappear. But we'll be hunted," she said, her voice cracking, "by nobles. By Ravari law, by everyone. I'd rather run and stay alive than kneel and die slow." Kyle replied, "Wouldn't you?" Lira hesitated, then nodded. So they began to plan. Kyle spent the next day carefully mapping access routes through the old maintenance shafts. The station had forgotten tunnels, old cargo lines, and hidden hatches he'd used before. Lira, once a noble, knew which security checkpoints were understaffed or often bribed. They made a strange team, him with his tools and logic, her with her memory and instinct. They spoke in whispers at night, drawing sketches with light pens. "We'll move through this shaft," Kyle said, tapping the map. "Then cross the cold line here." Lira frowned. "The cold line freezes anyone without thermal protection." Kyle grinned. "Then I'll build us something that keeps our blood from turning to ice." She smiled at him. "You're clever for a human." He grinned back. "You're stubborn for an alien princess." She blushed slightly. I was never a princess. He raised an eyebrow. You act like one. They laughed quietly, forgetting for a moment the danger outside their door. 3 days later, the escape began. It started with silence, no alarms, no guards. Just the soft hum of the station's power grid. Kyle carried a tool pack filled with hacked ID cards, custom heat wraps, and a broken cum he had repurposed as a jammer. Lira wore a cloak, her silver skin hidden beneath dull brown fabric. Her once perfect posture was now bent to avoid notice. They slipped into the lower levels, moving fast but quiet. Every time a patrol passed, they ducked into vents or maintenance hatches. The cold line was the hardest part narrow, dark, and covered in frost. Their breath turned to ice, their hands burned from the cold. Kyle gritted his teeth and held Lyra's hand tightly. Almost through, he whispered. Just a little further, she nodded. Even though her lips were turning blue, but they made it barely. Kyle wrapped Lira in heat foil. As soon as they cleared the shaft, she shivered in his arms, whispering, "You saved me again," he smiled. "It's becoming a habit." They reached the outer hangar, old launch bay, no one used anymore. One ship remained there, dusty but intact. Kyle had scouted it before. A Ravari skimmer with stealth plating. He ran to the panel and began to hack the lock. 3 minutes, he said. Fingers flying over the screen, Lira stood guard, but her body trembled not from cold, but from fear. She whispered, "Do you think we'll make it?" Kyle didn't look back. "We have to. Why are you doing this?" She asked softly. "You could have walked away so many times." He paused, then turned to her. "Because you didn't ask for this," he said, "and neither did I. But here we are." He smiled gently. "And now I don't want to lose you." The ship door opened with a hiss. "Let's go," he said, but just as they stepped aboard, a voice rang out from the shadows. "Going somewhere? Traitors." Commander Raylon stood at the hangar entrance, flanked by 4 armored guards. His face was cold as stone, his eyes locked on Lira. "I warned you," he said. "Now you both die." Kyle stepped in front of her, arms raised, but Lira moved. Beside him, her eyes burning. "No," she said, "we're not yours anymore." Raylon raised his weapon, but just before he fired, Kyle slammed the launch button. The ship's thrusters ignited, the shockwave blasting the guards' back doors. Slammed shut, the hangar split open, and the skimmer shot into space like a comet. Kyle held the controls, his hands shaking. Lira collapsed into the co-pilot seat, gasping. "We did it," she whispered. "For now," Kyle said, "we're free, outside." Stars stretched endlessly. And for the first time in their strange story, there was no one chasing them, only the future waiting ahead. The stars outside the ship blinked quietly, as if holding their breath. Kyle sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the endless stretch of space. His fingers trembled slightly on the controls. But the ship was stable. For now, they were safe. Lira was quiet in the co-pilot chair, wrapped in a blanket. Her silver skin still pale from cold and fear. She looked small. Not like a noble or a warrior, just someone tired of running. Kyle finally turned to her and said, "We need to talk." She nodded, "Yes." "We do." They sat in silence for a while, not as strangers anymore, not just survivors. Then Kyle spoke again. "We have a choice now." Lira looked at him with tired eyes. "What choice?" He leaned forward, looking at the map display. "We can go to a neutral station, disappear, change names, live quietly." Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "And the other choice?" Kyle turned to her. "We return, not to surrender, but to fight. To tell the truth." She flinched. "They'll never believe us. Raylon is too powerful. Too respected, maybe." Kyle said softly, "But if we run forever, we stay." Afraid forever, Lira looked at her hands, the same hands that once wore royal jewelry. "I was raised to obey," she whispered. "To follow orders, to keep peace by being silent." She looked at him now, voice shaking. "But with you, I feel like I'm finally me." Kyle smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time the galaxy met the real you." They spent the next 2 days hiding inside the ship, resting, repairing, deciding. Each night they talked about life, about Earth, about the Ravari culture. Each conversation brought them closer. Not out of duty, but out of choice. At one point, Lira sat beside him and said, "Do you regret it?" Kyle raised an eyebrow. "Regret what?" She looked nervous. "All of this. Bonding with me, risking everything." Kyle laughed lightly. "You think falling through a ceiling was part of my plan?" She smiled, then her voice softened. "I don't regret it either." On the third morning, they made their decision. The ship turned back, not to the Ravari capital, but to a peace station, one protected by a galactic council where war and violence were banned. It was neutral ground, but it also meant they'd be found quickly. Kyle submitted a message to the Ravari High Circle. A simple statement: "We request a hearing, public and witnessed by all clans." When they landed, the place was already crawling with nobles, guards, and curious travelers. Some recognized Lira. Many stared at Kyle. A few laughed, some spat, but neither of them looked away. Inside the grand hall, the elders stood once again. This time behind reinforced crystal. The crowd was silent. Waiting, Commander Raylan was there too, arms crossed, sneering. "You came crawling back," he growled, ready to beg. Lira stood tall. "No, I came to speak," the elder gestured. "You may begin." Lira stepped forward, voice strong but calm. "For years I've followed your rules, wore your chains, and smiled while dying inside." Gasps echoed through the hall. She continued, "But one day a human fell through my ceiling, and instead of laughing at me, he looked away." She turned to Kyle. "That was the moment I felt seen." Kyle took a step forward. "I didn't know your laws. I didn't understand your customs. But I knew one thing: you deserve to choose your own life." He raised his voice. "This bond didn't start with love, but it's become something more than survival." Raylan laughed bitterly. "This is weakness, not truth." Lira stepped toward him. "No, this is strength, the strength to leave what's easy, to speak when it's dangerous, and to love without control." The crowd murmured, watching the scene unfold like a story no one expected. The eldest Ravari, who had remained quiet until now, finally stood. His eyes met Lira's, then Kyle's. "This is not the bond we expected," he said slowly, "but perhaps it is the bond we need." He raised his hand, and the hall fell silent. "By Ravari law, your bond stands true, tested, and complete." A wave of whispers and shock swept through the room. But Kyle didn't care, and neither did Lira. They turned to each other in the middle of that crowded hall. Kyle smiled. "So, what now?" Lira smiled back. "Now, we live." Outside, the stars remained the same, but everything had changed. They weren't running anymore. They weren't pretending. They weren't strangers trapped by tradition. They were two souls who had found each other in the most impossible way. And now, for the first time, they had a future not forced by fear, but chosen with love.